because it perhaps is the most dangerous of all to our liberties. Remember, when you are in a legal architecture of war, you have no rights. Cicero wrote 2,000 years ago, in times of war, the law is silent. The definition of war is what makes what is customarily murder legal. I want to repeat that. The definition of war is what is customarily made murder becomes legal. So that's a pretty strong step to take, right? And literally half of the Constitutional Convention and the debates during the ratification period was about standing armies and who would have authority to take the United States into war. Because all the founders understood standing armies were the death of republics. And they all, including those in favor of a muscular presence like Hamilton, insisted only the Congress can authorize the initiation of warfare. That unlike the British king, the United States president could not initiate warfare. He could only effectuate a declaration of Congress. And this is the very first president, George Washington, who, by the way, sat as the presiding officer of the Constitutional Convention, said only Congress can authorize the offensive use of the military, even if it was short of war. And that was the understanding of all the framers. Thomas Jefferson needed 10 statutes that he asked and got to fight against the Barbary pirates in the 1800s. This idea that the president could initiate the offensive use of the military on his own would have been viewed as an impeachable offense. And again, the reason is, as Madison explained, James Madison, fourth president, father of the Constitution, liberty cannot be preserved in a state of permanent warfare. Liberty cannot be preserved in a state of permanent warfare. And that's where we are, ladies and gentlemen, today. Whether by misinterpretation of the authorization to use military force or otherwise, de facto, the going premise, Congress and the executive branch and the judiciary, is after 9/11, war is perpetual. No one has ever suggested any kind of benchmark that says the war against international terrorism, however amorphous that is over. You've had from time to time Obama mumble, well, we really should get the war over at some time. But he's just used words. He's never said, well, this is when we'll know the war is over. And given the timidity of our politicians, who's going to stand up and say the war against terrorism over? Because there's always a possibility of another terrorist act. You can't reduce the risk to zero. So we are in a state of permanent war. Now the second thing that's even more frightening is that because for the first time in history after 9/11, we declared war not against a nation or an organization, but a tactic. The tactic being international terrorism. The battlefield is everywhere on the planet. Because terrorism can be used everywhere on the planet. So in terms of the legal architecture, we are in a war zone. And the president could use a Predator drone here, just like he could use anywhere else that he does, whether it's in Yemen, or in Somalia, or in Afghanistan, or Pakistan, or otherwise. Now, you could say, well, he hasn't done it, which is true. There are political checks on the stupidity and tyranny of a president. But they're political. They're not legal. They're not our rights anymore. They're the indulgence of the president, which to me is shocking and unacceptable. I was taught that in the United States, the rule of law is king. The king is not the law. And now we have a situation where the president really does whatever he wants, subject to political constraints. There is no law. My baptism in Washington was Watergate. And the first task I was entrusted with at the Office of Legal Counsel was to write a 100-page memorandum of what was an impeachable offense. There was a third-rate burglary, cover-up, or whatever. I mean, minuscule compared to what the incumbent has done with regard to trashing the Constitution and claiming the most limitless power ever by the tyrants stemming back to Genghis Khan. Have you ever heard of a tyrant before say, I can kill anybody I want with a Predator drone on my say-so alone, no accountability before the fact, after the fact, or ever? It's hard. Can you even conceive of describing a power that's more tyrannical than that? I guess he stopped short of saying I can use the rack and the screw, but that's about it in terms of executing them. And this is where we are, in the United States today, which is truly shocking that Congress has been so complacent. All of these things the president does, it's open and notorious. Congress knows about it. There's no impeachment inquiry. That when Congress is lied to by James Clapper when he said, no, the NSA is not collecting data on millions of Americans. Does Congress initiate perjury prosecution? Well, they can do that with Roger Clemens because he plays baseball, you know. That's really serious stuff when a baseball player like. But when James Clapper does it, yeah, shrug your shoulders. He's just entrusted with policing trillions of megabits of data about us. Really? I mean, that's how really childish and juvenile the Congress has gotten. They don't accept their responsibility. And let me tell you this anecdote about the Iraqi war resolution. A totally superfluous revolution since Saddam Hussein was not attacking the United States by any means. But in any event, the Congress refused. They said, we do not want to draft the resolution. The executive branch needs to draft it. And when the resolution was drafted, the members were angry that they had to vote on whether to authorize war against Iraq. They said, well, why are you making us vote? We don't want responsibility. Just the president should decide. We didn't come here to vote. We didn't come to honor the Constitution. This is supposed to be a sinecure, and you're making us do things that are serious. They were angry at forcing them to exercise their obligation to decide on war and peace, which they didn't do anyway, because the resolution didn't declare war against Iraq. It said the president can do it if he believes it's necessary. An echo of the Gulf of Tonkin resolution, which had similarly unhappy results. Don't expect members of Congress to know history all the way back to 1964. That's maybe 2 or 3 years before. But, you know, people don't read anymore. That's old-fashioned, quaint to read. I think that's even more heretical. So where are we today as a country? Now, I think that we have maybe 30 years before we follow the decline and fall of the Roman Empire, unless things are changed. Now, we do have the ability to change things, because history is biography. It's what you do, and I do, to protest the tyranny that now confronts us. Say, the tyranny looks soft, because we have a president who's not quite as megalomaniac as Napoleon was. But again, it's just his indulgence. There will come a time when there is a Napoleon in the White House. But the principles of the current president, past presidents, they lie around like loaded weapons, ready to be used by any incumbent who wants to really exercise far greater, tough, hard tyranny than the soft tyranny today. And part of it also is we have to recover as a people of pride and being independent. Say, don't spy on us. I have a right to be left alone, and I don't need to give a reason for it. The government needs a right to come with us. This is the spirit of the Fourth Amendment, which is it's so incredible to me because this is the spirit that launched the American Revolution. The Fourth Amendment issues were what caused the revolt. And it was captured in William Pitt the Elder was protesting against the excise in Great Britain. But his words were picked up by the American revolutionaries. And what he said was as follows. In Great Britain, the poorest man in his cottage may bid defiance to all the forces of the crown. Its roof may shake, the wind may blow through it, the storms may enter, the rain may enter, but the King of England cannot enter. All his forces dare not cross the threshold of the ruined tenement. That's the spirit of the Fourth Amendment. Where has it gone? The government needs to get off my back unless I've done something wrong. They don't need to. They should not be spying on us whatsoever. And moreover, the travesty of the NSA surveillance program stems from the idea that they're not investigating crime. They say, oh, they're gathering foreign intelligence, which includes everything, including your pulse rate. It indicates how much they have global warming or something because it affects how much carbon dioxide is emitted into the atmosphere. It covers everything. It's one thing to authorize government to undertake searches and seizures to detect and punish crime. That's a legitimate government interest. But what about just collecting information for some other reason? It's not as though there are not enough criminal prohibitions against terrorism. My God, the entire code is filled with prohibitions. And a material assistance to terrorism includes you give them a piece of bone